I want to share with you, for me, 3 important questions about typography and type design, and how I found answers and what I found as answer. And first of them is, what makes a typeface better? As a typeface designer also, being a graphic designer is always helped me. I always had an advantage of being a graphic designer to see the needs of typography and typeface in the graphic and advertising industry. But when it comes to design a typeface, my graphic design skills actually get inefficient on it, because as you know, I think there's a huge scale distinction between them. For example, if you make a 50 to 70 poster, and if you want to use 40-point text on this poster, it's going to be average 7 millimeter, and that means 1 to 100 scale distinction. And it's also the same with A4 paper. It's more distinction, 1 to 148 difference between the scale of typeface and the graphic design. And this means actually these areas needs different design principles. It is just like you cannot make the huge plane with the same material you did the paper plane, and also you cannot make the paper plane with the heavy metal. Because they stand for different conditions. Actually, what I'm talking about is optical adjustments. Typeface designers call that optical adjustment and optical design. But to understand why we need to make optical adjustments to typefaces, I'm talking about text typefaces, by the way. To understand why we need it, I think we need to know how we see the objects. This is the scheme of our brain from the top, brain and eyes. Actually, when we're looking at the object, our 2 eyes are sending data to our brain. And what our brain doing is merging that 2 horizontally spreaded image into 1 image. When you look at an object which is too far from you, your eyes are getting almost in the same direction. That means your eyes are sending almost similar images, almost 2 similar images to your brain. But if you look at an object which is closer to your eyes, just like you are reading something, your eyes are getting in 2 different angles. And what your eyes are seeing is really different images. And what your eye is sending is 2 completely different images to your brain. And what your brain is doing, I made a simulation about it, like how I see an object. This is how we see with the left eye. I actually put a cube in front of my eye, like this, close. This is the view from my left eye. And this is the view from my right eye. You can easily see the difference between I see with the left side of the cube with my left eye, but I didn't see it with the right eye. So what brain doing is merging these horizontally spread images, but merging these vertical alignments. It's hard to merge it. I even tried to made this in Photoshop, but I couldn't that. And this is what brain does. So scientists say this could be a possible explanation for some optical disorders. So that's why I could make this optical adjustment to my upcoming typeface. As you see, I made the crotch of an A, the lower bottom part, narrower than the upper part of the stem. And also same in I letter, capital I. I made upper part narrower than the bottom part. So this is what optical adjustment is, and I think you cannot see these adjustments in the reading text. You don't see it, and I need it to make it better reading. Last month, I visited Efes city in Izmir, in my hometown, and I suggest everyone to see there. And I'm really fascinated with these Roman inscriptions. They are dated to year 0. And actually it is the date before Trajan column has been built. I am fascinated with these Roman capitals because we are still using the same roots of these capitals. They made 2,000 years ago, and they still provide the basis of modern typeface design. I can easily say that calligraphy is only thing that improves a typeface and makes typeface steady and strong. If you look in that way, you are going to understand this is based on brush calligraphy. You can see how manipulated strokes are made with the brush tool. We like to see calligraphic roots in typeface. We wanted to see them. I don't know actually. Yeah, I have some ideas, but I don't know. Like, we want to see calligraphic roots. In that time, in ancient times, they used some tools to make typefaces. But I wonder why we still need the root of calligraphy, why we need the still guidance of calligraphy in modern text typefaces. I wonder that, and I actually found an answer for that, which is called Darwinist explanation, and it says actually human brain wants to run with minimum energy. It likes to use statistical informations before our past experiences. Actually, it is always happens to me. This is our cat, and this is my wife's shoes. When I do not directly look at that, I always confuse that shoes are the cat. Because I think my brain says to me like that, it's like coding. If you see that size thing black and white, and if it's on the floor, it should be 90% cat. But and what if it was a letter? What if it was a letter when we are not directly looking at that? Because average people reads 20 to 25 letters in a second. So that means we cannot look directly to letters. We are reading the words. So that means we don't have a time to look at the read letter by letter. And what if it was differently designed letter? Not following the roots of calligraphy. I would probably confuse it with another letter, or I'm going to spend more time and more energy to understand what my eye is looking at. And this is something like called legibility. Typeface designers call this legibility, and I think that's the difference between readability and legibility. And the hardest challenge for type designers, I think, for the new type designers who wants to make a typeface, is designing a new typeface with following old roots. Because we graphic designers always want to make different things in design. And graphic designers always want to use new typefaces. And other question I asked to myself, how to draw better curves? Sorry. As a human, actually, we don't think too much about mathematics of curves, because as human, we are natural curve drawers with our 9 joints. It's even the hardest is drawing a straight line for us. If you are designing in optic scale, you can make any path with a lot of versions, like I did in here, a crotch of an A with different versions. Maybe you cannot differ with this size or with only just one letter, but if you make that poor drawings in all alphabet in the font, probably that could be a reason for designers not to choose your typeface. And it's directly related to how you draw Bezier curves. We need to understand how Bezier curves are important for us and how good invention it is. But before moving on Bezier curves, we need to know, I think we need to know, the previous techniques in history, how to draw curves before Bezier techniques. First of them is used by ancient Greeks, and they used to understand the elliptical movement of the planets with this. It's basically described like turning disk around another disk, and I made these 3D printed tools to understand how it works. If you use same size disk, same size 2 disk, I'm playing again. The most known curve you can draw with this is called cardioid, which is shaped like a heart. And if you can use size variable disks, you can draw any curve you want. So with the it's almost a similar method. It is developed for digital products. It's called Fourier Transform, which is the name is mathematician. It uses the basic principle, and this is how it draws. It's the same principle, turning disk around or on another disk. And I did this for ISType that actually used too many disks. And I think we don't prefer to draw with this instead of Bezier curves. And this really looks like how we draw. because we are using maybe not perfect circles, but we are using elliptical movements with our hands to draw anything naturally. And another technique is the simplest technique, I think. If you define 2 points and if you can use a string with it, this is the simulation I made. And the interesting thing with that is if you move the distance between pins you are using, it's going to draw ellipses and getting narrower. And if you make the distance 0 of 2 pins, it's going to draw a perfect circle. And this technique is used also. And the other technique is called Da Vinci Technique, and he says if you move the 2 corners of triangle on crossed lines, the 3rd corner is going to draw a curve like this. I also made a 3D printed tool for that, and this is how it draws. And if you change the edge of the curves, you can get different curves. Edge of triangles, you can get different curves. And the same method, by using same method, there is in 1900s a tool invented to draw an ellipse. It is called ellipsograph. This is how it draws. I like them. And finally, Bezier curves. Actually, it's described as a moving dot between moving lines, like this. You can follow red dot. This is how computer calculating the position of dot. And there are actually simple methods to draw a nice and perfect lines. And I made to show you 2 examples. One is suggested curve with proportionally spaced areas, and another one is not recommended. And you can see it's how it's too long control tangent, and it's the too short. They could seem actually. They could seem look like the similar, but you can be sure you cannot get the similar curve with the not suggested one. If you look in micro size, you are going to understand what's wrong with it. And this is I made the simulation exactly same as you see, 2 of them, and I want to show you what's going on, how computer is calculating. Actually, I made a few calculations and I used 9 lines to calculate the location of the dots, moving dot. You can see here how proportionally divided spaces with the right control point, right tangent. And this calculation used 9 lines, spaced proportionally very well. And this calculation, actually it's used 9 line too, but if you can't, you are going to see 6 line. And 3 line is it's useless here in this area. And it's not using that lines. So the right one cannot get perfect line. And it's also getting a tension there. And the thing is to know, I think, to get nice Bezier curves, to get nice curves, you have to use these control tangents, control points proportionally. So at least you have to use one tangent 90 degree or 180 degree. So another thing to know is to make them parallel and start and end points of curve, and that's you need to make them parallel as possible. So my third question was, why typography matters? Actually, it's really general question, and I think everyone has an idea about that. And when I look at the sources, they always talk about how typography is creating a mood of graphic design or visual communication, and how typography increases the impact of design with typefaces, with typography. I know it's typography is the thing receiving message with unconscious way. It's true, yes, it's true, but I think it should be more than a look of typography. I think to know what typography is, we need to know communication ways between people. A communication theory says that there is 3 main communication ways between people, and one of them is visual, second of them is vocal, and the third is, they call it kinesthetic, which is body language with another name. So as graphic designers, we think we are the creators of visual communication, right? But what if I say we are not actually? If you think about when you first learned to read letters, you are going to remember the letters were actually the presentation of the sounds. So we learned we are using phonetic alphabet. Actually, they are the shapes, but they are presenting the sounds, actually. So I think with this information, I can easily say that typography is the only thing communicates vocally in graphic design, in visual communication media. So I found a study, research about this, which says when you read anything, actually this study proves there is no silent reading in human brain. It says when you're reading any text, it makes an activity in your visual cortex, and also it makes an activity in your auditory cortex. So this study, I want to show you what they did. This is basically what they did in the study. They showed to patients the part of the novel with milliseconds showing the words, and as a result, they showed 2 colored words of the part of the novel. So I actually read the whole research of that, and I found 3 important things for designers. And on this scheme, it shows the blue line is for the gray word, and the red line is for the white word. And that says it's the scheme of the audio cortex of the brain. And that says whatever it is you're reading, it is making an activity in your auditory cortex. But if it is hard to read, it is hard to understand, it's making more activity in your auditory cortex. And this scheme also shows how your brain needs audio activity. And the blue line for the gray word, this shows how in 100 milliseconds while reading, how your brain needs to characterize activity of auditory cortex with the gray word and to understand what it is, what it is you are looking at. And this is the enough activity to understand what is looking with auditory cortex. And the red one is for the white word, and you can see it's not hard to understand because it's white. And okay, this is enough in auditory cortex to read it. And I think this is another important result. It says the delay between the visual and auditory cortex. They say it's 33 milliseconds, and which means while we are hearing the voice of the word, our eyes are reading the next word of the text because of 32 millisecond delay. So actually this information changed my point of view for typefaces, and I can say that typefaces are the agents using your inner voice. So as typeface designer, I think my responsibility is designing a typefaces, training a typeface which speaks perfect and fluently in your brain. Thanks.